Good evening. Today is the 2nd of July, 2022. I'm Robert Crescione.
I'm John Gatsis.
Welcome to America in Danger and the 85th week of the Great Reset.
Great Reset, globalist insurrection, globalist onslaught, globalist takeover.
Yep.
Any number of synonyms or euphemisms one can use. Same old authoritarian impulse of a few to control the many.
Exactly. And that's very apropos, being this is the July 4th weekend.
Yep.
And, we have actually, there is a group calling for an F the 4th celebration. Now, we know who they are.
Right.
They're the malcontents, the purple-haired, face piercing,
right.
Just hate America crowd.
Right.
Like Megan Rapinoe, who,
yeah.
Biden has nominated for a Freedom Medal, which is absolutely preposterous.
Preposterous on many levels. For one thing, she hates this country. Why would she accept a medal, of freedom from the president of a country she despises? Though she's more than willing to represent that country in competition and sport, and then on the world stage, she ridicules it and renounces it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I renounce her.
As do I. I just totally do not. They're repugnant.
I mean,
those kind of people are repugnant. I reject them offhand.
Right, and I can't really get too wound up about some purple-haired lesbian whose team couldn't even beat the 15-year-old boys varsity team in an actual match. So really, she's nothing.
Right, exactly, and certainly does not deserve a national or even global
that's correct.
stage.
She's done nothing to in the furtherance of liberty.
Right.
She's basically another, malcontent, resentful communist who hates, for whatever reason, the dealt of cards that she was dealt by life.
There you go.
Even though she has notoriety and fame, she's still a resentful, bitter shrew. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, this is July 4th weekend, and so many people. It's interesting, if questioned on the street, so many people have no clue what the 4th of July weekend is all about. They have no understanding of the Declaration of Independence.
Right.
And, they don't know what those things were about. So I've got a clip of a reading of the Declaration of Independence, and I want you, the audience, to listen to this carefully, because there are 27 grievances that the founders of this country listed against King George and Great Britain.
Right.
And right now, we have grievances against our own government, and unfortunately, some of our elected representatives, like Tom Tillis, refused to allow those grievances to be addressed.
Right.
He shut his office down when a few pro-gun individuals decided to protest out front.
Right, to protest the recent capitulation on the part of him and 15 other Republicans to get some legislation passed that really is inimical to Second Amendment rights.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Yeah.
But anyway, I want to run this clip, and I want you to watch this and look at this and listen to the grievances that they had. And, you really need to look at some of the parallels to today.
Right.
How our government is grossly overstepping some of their bounds. We see Kathy Hochul in New York. They've just passed a bunch of laws because the Supreme Court struck down their for-cause requirement on their concealed carry permits.
Yeah. So they're doing all these intentional workarounds to make it just as onerous for citizens. These people, ultimately, they don't care about the checks and the balances and unless it serves their immediate purposes. And they're not even open-minded enough to acknowledge that maybe there are some reasons that the Constitution is structured the way it is. And that if you're going to have certain basic rights enshrined in it, they should pretty well be applied equally across the board. In New York and a tiny handful of states aren't willing to do that with respect to the Second Amendment.
Right.
The Supreme Court just ruled that they can't do that.
Right.
And they're doing, of course, New York has decided, well, we are going to do it anyway, and so they've erected these workarounds.
Yep. Now, as you listen to the grievances outlined in the Declaration of Independence, think about it. They were declaring what offended them, what grievances they had against the monarchy. And you really need to keep those in mind when you read the Constitution. because those were the basis for the Constitution.
Right.
Those were the basis. Quartering troops, kangaroo courts to allow British soldiers to murder colonists
Right.
and have kangaroo court trials where they were let off scot-free. I mean, all of those things were grievances that they had, and we have a lot of those same grievances today.
Absolutely.
We have a president right now who has just enacted even more restrictions on oil and gas. And keep in mind that he has enacted over 100 restrictions. When he looks into the camera and says, "It's not my fault,"
Right.
I don't think. Let me check my cue card and make sure it's not my fault. Yeah, it's not my fault. See?
Yeah, it says here I'm explicitly supposed to say that it's not my fault.
Not my
so
fault.
That's what I'm doing here.
But 100 restrictions on oil and gas, and now he's blaming social media for inflation. He's blaming greedy gas station owners for the high price of
Right,
fuel.
and that's what's entertaining to me. I mean, I don't know. I'm not probably the best person to give advice on how to lie about things, but if I were going to deflect blame, I'd pick one thing and stick with it. Okay, but when you're blaming 10 different things. Okay, that says that it's your fault, and it also says that you have the mentality of a child when it comes to trying to deflect blame.
Yeah, well, these Democrats that are in power right now, and a lot of the Rhino Republicans, a lot of the Republicans, period,
Yeah.
they have a childish
They
mentality
do have,
about
well, they
these
certainly
things.
have a very superficial and childish approach to life and liberty.
Absolutely.
It's really quite in evidence by a lot of these people. And, there's a lot of reasons and theories I have as to how that's evolved, because, we used to have some statesmen. And it's gotten to the point now where many of these people, especially among the Democrats, they're really very superficial thinkers.
Yes, they are.
Extremely superficial thinkers. And I think that's because now we're into 3 or 4 generations deep of this sort of affirmative action kind of approach to promoting people. And so now, in the early days of affirmative action, competent people who had acquired their positions by merit and who were competent promoted these ideas of affirmative action, so they brought along people who necessarily weren't qualified.
Right.
But now we're getting to a point where a lot of those people are now people in senior positions, and they're doing the choosing, but they're not competent.
Yeah.
They've risen up through the ranks of an institutionalized level of incompetence that is accepted now, and particularly in certain quarters, it's profound. I think.
I
Just
agree.
listening to these people talk, I think to myself, really?
Yeah.
You can't be this dumb. But then often it turns out that I think they are.
They are, absolutely. So take a look at this reading of the Declaration of Independence. And as you go through the remainder of this July 4th holiday, we really need to be thankful that we were given a country, not perfect. Nothing's going to be perfect
Got
when humans are involved.
That's right. That's right.
It's not going to be perfect. But you know what? This country has come closer to societal equality, not
Right.
equity.
Right.
Not equity now,
Right.
but equality and the equality of opportunity. Now, there's no doubt there were some hiccups along the way.
Sure.
But that's, I'd say by far, why do we have 2 million people wanting to come into
Well,
this country
exactly.
across the southern border, take the risk of dying along the trail, paying coyotes to bring them across?
And even at the height of those periods in our history where people would say, oh, this represents, the darkest periods of our history, people were still trying to get here.
Exactly.
Come on, folks.
Yeah, I don't see 2 million illegals crossing China's border.
I sure don't.
Or North Korea's border.
That's right.
Or
Or even Western Europe that much.
Right.
You know?
The only reason they're crossing into Western Europe and Eastern Europe is because they're fleeing. I'm not going to say it on here, but cesspool countries.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
And they're the nearest ones that they can
They're
get
the
to
nearest
that
ones.
aren't
They're with them.
cesspool
Yeah,
countries.
exactly. But they're quickly becoming that way.
That's
so take
right.
a look at this and reflect on this a little bit. We need to celebrate our independence. We need a renewal in this country of that independent spirit.
The basic understanding of the civics and the
Yes.
and the rationale for the founding of this republic.
Exactly.
This
This
constitutional republic. Yeah.
Because nowhere in the documents does it say democracy.
That's right.
So take a look at this, and we'll be back. When we come back, we're going to discuss a little bit of the High Court's
Yeah, some Supreme
slap
Court.
down of the EPA,
more
which
Supreme
is
Court
a good
news.
deal. Absolutely. So, Lee, if you'll run that Declaration of Independence video, we'll be back in just a minute. Stay tuned. All right, now there are some definitely interesting points to be made about a few of those grievances. And I jotted down a few of them as it was running through, because they're very similar to things that are going on today,
Right.
except being done from within,
Right. Domestically rather
domestically. Yeah. You know, one thing that they pointed out early in the writing there is that governments should not be changed for light and transient reasons or causes. And we see numerous politicians up there seeking to change government. Okay, we're going to pack the court because we don't get our way. We're going to do away with the filibuster because we can't get our way.
Right.
You know, we're going to dissolve the electoral college because we don't get our way.
Well, these Democrats and leftists, I mean, they're so mercurial. 1 minute, okay, oh, January 6th, the insurrection,
Yeah.
questioning any aspect of the election is just, you know, the worst type of you know, threat to our democracy.
Yeah.
Then they don't get a Supreme Court ruling that they don't like. Supreme Court's illegitimate, needs to be dissolved.
Yeah,
you
needs
know,
to be dissolved.
right.
And go out and protest in front of
And-
the justices' homes in spite of federal law
right,
prohibiting
and
that.
perpetrate violence. You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, that's why I characterize these people largely as children. And
children,
frankly, if you're intending to get through to them with what you just showed, never going to happen.
No.
They haven't got the attention span or the wherewithal,
Right.
or frankly the intellectual horsepower to even absorb any of that.
No, my greatest hope is that a few people out there like us decide, I've had enough.
I've had enough.
I'm fed up.
That's
I'm
right.
sick of this garbage.
That's right.
They talked about that King George erected new offices and sent swarms. And it's interesting they use the term swarms because that implies insects, bugs, annoyances.
Right,
You know, sent swarms of officers to harass and eat out the souls of our people.
Right.
Well, I mean, if you look, we have so many alphabet agencies out there.
The whole
with
federal bureaucracy.
swarms
Yeah, the whole federal bureaucracy is such a swarm.
of little petty bureaucrat
Right.
tyrants just looking
Right.
for, oh, you didn't dot that I right there.
Locusts and parasites.
Locusts and parasites. You know, it says he combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to us and to our Constitution. Well, what Biden do just as soon as he got back in office, he jumped right back in the Paris Accord.
Right.
He wants the Iran agreement.
Right.
He is butting up and supporting the World Health Organization.
Well, and he's completely supplicating China at every turn.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely
he
is.
lies prostate in front of China.
Yeah, and has incited insurrections against us using savages from the frontiers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of people out there will say, "Oh, well, that was Trump who incited their insurrection."
Right,
Well, no.
Right.
Not when you have provocateurs, FBI undercover agents, you have Capitol Police opening the doors. No, that wasn't Trump inciting an insurrection.
And it wasn't much of an insurrection. No
But-
firearms. You know.
Well, I still fall back on Liz Cheney talking about it was a precise 7-step detailed plan of insurrection. And it's like, somebody forgot the step where you arm
Right.
the
The
insurrectionists.
insurrectionists. That's right.
But, you know, if you look at the insurrections that were staged using the savages of BLM,
Right.
the savages of Antifa,
That's right.
the savages out there in the pro-choice crowd, all
Where-
of these savages.
Where people observed pallet loads of bricks being dropped off in various areas in
Yeah.
the cities, clearly organized.
Yep.
Okay. If anybody should be being prosecuted for insurrection, it's those organizations and those individuals.
Absolutely. And with that, we got to take a little commercial break. When we come back, we're gonna touch on the EPA ruling of the Supreme Court.
Pretty
and,
big, actually.
We're going to talk about some other testimony of Dr. Birx. And,
Oh, all right. Yeah.
You know, things like that. So you won't want to miss that. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after these words from the sponsors. All right, we are back. And, you know, some of the other things we talk about on this show are about individual liberty.
Right.
And that's exactly what this weekend is about, the July 4th weekend.
Correct.
About individual liberty, national liberty. And we really, I would like to see a whole month devoted to this.
Well, we certainly devote whole months to all these other ridiculous things, these made up and really somewhat subversive,
Yeah.
movements and identities, which,
Yeah, I'd like to see the entire month of June devoted to independence.
right.
And
Culminating in
on the 4th of July with the big,
Yep.
fireworks blowout. Yeah.
I would endorse that.
Yeah. Well, in a typical 6-3 decision here, with the 3 commies on the Supreme Court dissenting, of course, because they love big government. Kagan, Sotomayor, and Breyer, they love big government.
And have you noticed that this goes back to what I was saying before? I mean, about this sort of, institutionalized affirmative action and incompetence. You read their opinions a lot of times, and they seem really simple-minded and puerile and not rooted in the rigor and logic of the legal profession. They're much more just, well, this is wrong, and we can't do this, and wah. They have much more of that feel than any kind of actual, discursive sort of dissection of the law and the analysis of the constitutional elements of it. It's really, embarrassing.
It is. I tell you, the whole.
Sotomayor in particular, she's puerile.
I tell you, some of their arguments are they're not even legal arguments.
Right.
They're emotional
That's what I
arguments.
mean. They're just
assertions of emotion.
Absolutely.
Really? That's not why you're on the Supreme Court.
That's correct.
You're supposed to make findings emotionless. And I understand everybody has their biases
Right.
and their emotions and their feelings on things, but when you ascend to that position,
That's right.
you're not supposed to be making your decisions based on your emotion or your like or dislike. It's supposed to be on the Constitution and law.
Right, and really, and just to review, all the Supreme Court's function is to say, okay, this law or this outcome at a lower court level is not consistent with the actual words in the Constitution.
Exactly.
Okay, doesn't mean you can't go back and create some words in the legislature to affect what it is you want, or if it's really a major thing, like some fundamental aspect of the Constitution, it can be amended. There is a process by which it can be amended. And if there's enough impetus on the part of the people writ large to do that, that will get done. But the Supreme Court's purpose is to sit there and say, yeah, just like in the New York case, well, you can't impose these restrictions on citizens of your state because it's not consistent with the very words written in the Second Amendment to the Constitution.
Exactly.
Okay. And a person, regardless of their personal view about these things, should be able to dispense that much logic and analysis to render an honest opinion on that. I could do it. I don't have the legal training, but I could certainly say, I don't like it, but the words are clearly written here. This rule is not consistent with the. So I've got to side with this finding.
Yeah.
But these 3 that you just mentioned, they don't even consider any of that. They just say, well, what are we going to do about something like what happened in Uvalde? Well, that's not the point. That's not what you're there to address.
Exactly.
We have a legislature. We have 2 other co-equal branches of government, for the purpose of dealing with those types of issues.
I agree. I fully agree. Well, the Supreme Court in this ruling, they said that the EPA has overstepped its bounds in regulating carbon dioxide output from power plants.
Right.
Now, first of all, let me say this. CO2 is not a pollutant, people. It's just not.
Right.
You can up the level of CO2 out there and no one's harmed.
That's correct. It's not it's not poisonous in the sense that it's toxic. It's a process of transpiration. Anybody that took any basic biology knows there's a basic cycle, the Krebs cycle and all that, and you have nitrogen exchange and you have plants putting out oxygen and taking in CO2, and we do the opposite, and it's all, and besides, CO2 is kind of a trace gas. As greenhouse gases go, it's not a very good one, and it's not very much of it, in the atmosphere compared to water vapor, for example. So the whole premise, and I think that's what you're saying, the whole premise of CO2 as the cause of what I don't even see as a real, even the measurements that there's this huge global warming phenomenon are not really very reliable or good or predictive.
They are not. In fact, the long-term monitoring of these temperatures is geologically not even a click on the clock.
Right.
Not even 1 second on the geologic clock.
Right.
Have we been measuring these things? Same
Right.
thing with storms.
It's as if you
know.
got up this morning and said, wow, it's 72 degrees out there. Well, that must be the temperature forever, and didn't even check back. I mean,
Right.
you know, it's such a tiny fraction of the time
Mm-hmm.
that things have been, you know, from a climatological standpoint, have been occurring on this planet. The numbers are really meaningless.
They are meaningless. And when you factor in the changes in how those temperatures were monitored and all this, and they talk about, oh, we went back to the ice cores and we've done this, we've done that. Well, you
Yeah,
know what?
whatever.
All those are sketchy at best. You're looking at things that are hundreds of thousands of years old, millions of years old.
Certainly worthwhile to pursue.
Sure.
For the purposes of analysis and enhancing scientific understanding, not worth a plug nickel in terms of forming policy
Right.
about how we generate our energy and about how we judge what's going on with the climate in the present day. It's just
Exactly.
absolute fantasy that these people are engaging
It's
in.
big picture, 30,000-foot views.
Yeah,
It's not data that you can take and forecast
That's
what it's
right.
going to be in
That's
2 years.
right.
You know, and if the sea level was rising, as they say it is,
right.
then why have all of these insider establishment types bought oceanfront
All these oceanfront,
property?
right.
Obama just bought oceanfront property. What? John Kerry lives on the oceanfront.
Right.
What is that?
Well, and I just go back to my basic assertion, and this isn't an assertion, this is a fact that can be borne out by simple research. Every one of the predictions of these climate alarmists has been wrong for the last 30 years. Name me a single thing they predicted that has come to pass.
Not one.
You know.
Not one. And even now, you know, they talk about the glaciers melting. Oh, well, the sun's getting hot. Well, the glaciers are melting from underneath. Oh, well, that's because the sunlight goes down and heats up the subsurface. It's like, no, it's because you have tectonic actions going on day and night. We just had the largest underwater volcano in history go off. And what do volcanoes produce?
Well, a lot of
Lava,
CO2.
heat, lava. You know,
Right.
these glaciers are warming from the bottom up, not from the top down.
Right, right.
And plus, if the glaciers didn't recede, you know what? Kathy Hochul wouldn't be in office right
Well, that's
now.
right.
She'd be under about a mile of ice.
Right, we've just come off of the little ice age from, you know, a few
Exactly.
millennia ago. Well, again, all this stuff is really, it's just contrived, scaremongering.
It is.
You know, and easy to sell to people who are easily alarmed. Increasingly, in our soft, sort of luxurious, high standard of living society, people are easily frightened. They're easily
that's true.
frightened.
That's true.
And they trust these people too much, and they're not trustworthy. They're fundamentally not
You
trustworthy.
got that right. Now, John Roberts went on to say about the coal, you know, restrictions of CO2 on coal and what have you. He says, it may be a sensible solution to the crisis today.
Yeah, I don't agree.
No,
I reject that.
I reject that offhand.
Yeah.
It's not a sensible solution at all. You know, it's a sensible solution if you buy into the nonsense that's being pushed by the climate crowd, the climate hoaxers. You know, nobody denies that the climate's changing.
No, but it's always changed.
It has always changed.
Right.
Otherwise, you know, we wouldn't have the Grand Canyon. We wouldn't have marine fossils in the middle of Utah.
Right.
We most likely wouldn't have a huge salt lake in the middle of
That's
Utah
right.
if the climate didn't change.
And to the extent that it is getting maybe a little warm, I mean, do you really believe that a 1 degree Celsius increase in mean atmospheric temperature, global temperature, 100 years from now is a sufficient reason to blow everything up and turn everybody into a serf? You know, again, to where we have very little access to cheap and usable energy, which is all they want. They just know that if they can take away our efficient and inexpensive energy, it greatly limits our ability to act on our liberties.
Absolutely.
Frankly.
Absolutely. And I go back to the Declaration of Independence where they talked about that the king has incited insurrections against us using the savages from the frontier.
Mm-hmm.
And I assert that that's what BLM is used for. That's what Antifa is used for.
Right.
That's what the climate crisis
Absolutely.
is used for.
Absolutely.
That's what all of these things are used for, to seize power, to gain power, to control the population. That's what they're doing.
That's right. I completely agree. And this was actually, the last of a series of rulings that were a pretty good coalescing of this so-called, conservative majority of the court. I mean, I didn't know how all this was going to turn out, and I've been, sort of suspicious and not entirely happy with what I had observed heretofore, and I don't know what to expect going forward,
Right.
but these were good rulings. And this particular one probably is significant as in its own way as Roe and the Bruen case for the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
They were going to use the EPA to completely force and legislate a transformation of the way we create energy in this country, and it was going to be draconian, and it's already what they're doing is bad enough. It was going to be bad, and they just really got shut down on it. They got shut down on it, and thank the Lord.
Absolutely. And another thing about the whole alphabet agency empowerment, and I've really, this is just stuck in my craw for years now. Years ago I had to deal with OSHA, and looking into all that, OSHA promulgates regulation. The EPA promulgates regulation.
Right.
The ATF promulgates regulation. Every other alphabet agency out there promulgates regulation. The legislators who are lazy
Yep.
say, oh, you know what, let's create this agency over here, and they're going to make the rules.
Right. We don't have to actually think through that. We'll just give
We
them
don't
these
have
broad
to do-
sweeping powers and let
Yeah,
these
we want
unelected
you-
bureaucrats
Exactly.
rule
We
the
want you
day.
to make up rules about the environment.
Yeah.
Here's your authorization.
Right.
Now, to me, that's unconstitutional.
And it's an abrogation of their obligations and their duties.
It is absolutely an abrogation, because Congress, nowhere in the Constitution and I don't know why the Supreme Court hadn't taken this up before, nowhere in the Constitution is there the authority for the legislature to empower anyone
Well, has
to make laws.
anybody brought such a case?
Probably not.
I mean, the Supreme Court's not going to hear a case that isn't
Right,
brought.
They didn't brought. That's right. Nobody's brought this case.
I gotta
because-
think somewhere, somebody at some lower court, there's been such a, and now and the Supreme Court decides what they're willing to hear and what they aren't. And
That's another thing.
So and they're far from some pure pristine entity. I mean, I have just as much cynicism about them as any of these other people.
As do I. And a lot of the lower courts, they'll just dismiss a case offhand for lack of standing.
Right.
Oh, well, you can't sue for that because you're not directly affected by
Right.
it. And it's like, well, I think I am directly affected by an agency making rules, but it's costly. It's very expensive to bring a suit through and
That's
get it to
correct.
the Supreme Court.
Right.
It costs millions of
Well,
dollars.
really, you need organizations and people
Yeah.
who are like-minded, who say, okay, we need to get this test case up the ladder and up the chain in order to get a ruling on this. And there are a lot of lessons that some of the other people who are pushing some of these issues could learn from Roe. I mean, really, the pro-life crowd has been at it steadily for 50 years, and ultimately they held the day. Now, Roe was a bad ruling on its face. I mean, it was
very shaky.
very shaky. Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg said it was shaky and would probably fall one day, and it has, thankfully, because it was bad. It was an activist court. I mean, what's his name? Jeffrey Toobin of CNN exposing himself fame on the Zoom call. He said derisively, well, the originalists have won. Well, I'm happy the originalists have won.
Yeah.
Originalism is a judicial philosophy that says essentially we're going to look at the current text, we're going to look at the text of the Constitution and interpret it in terms of what was written in contemporaneous writings at the time or at the time of subsequent amendments, and we're going to interpret in that light, which is proper.
Absolutely.
Making stuff up out of whole cloth like they did with the so-called substantive due process, which is what the judicial philosophy they used to come up with their ruling in Roe back in '73, and a couple of these other sketchy sort of. Yeah, so I'm grateful for an originalist court. I think the words mean things.
They do.
And if you don't like the words that are in the Constitution, there are mechanisms for changing them.
There absolutely
Okay?
are. Absolutely are. And the founder said, government should not be changed for light and transient reasons.
That's right.
That's why it's not so easy to change, because it shouldn't be easy. We want to be able to change things when they need to be changed, but we want a big support for that.
Well, and the genius of the founders' construction was, and we're really seeing that here with the Supreme Court. I mean, really a co-equal branch acting as a check on what really right now feels like the whim of the majority acting in a lot of ways. I mean, so the founders, they didn't like democracy because it leads to tyranny. Okay, but they did like the idea of all power in government emanating from the people. So they created these mechanisms that filter and sort of retard the effects of the whim of the population. And really, the structure is brilliant.
It's amazing.
People are very foolish. It's very foolish to say, "Oh, that's outdated. We need to discard that." Wrong. It's not. It's a almost near perfect construction for human beings.
I'm going to tell you, anyone that's alive today in this country, you really need to be grateful that this group of people and the divine providence stepped in.
That's right.
To build what they have. You can criticize it all you want, and you know what? That's a privilege that you enjoy in this country.
And not many others. That's right. That's right.
Go to North Korea and do that.
That's right.
Oh, if you don't have a picture of dear leader in your home,
hell, go to UK and they don't have their free speech is not very free.
Right,
I mean, they'll throw you in jail for saying certain things.
Go to Canada.
Absolutely.
Just across the northern
Absolutely.
border.
Well, Canada's really, I mean, Justin Trudeau is really revealing himself for the authoritarian little tin pot communist dictator that he is.
Well, he comes by naturally.
He does. There's a genetic predisposition.
Love child,
to it.
that's right. Castro's love child. What else
right.
What else can we expect?
Yeah.
You know, he is a communist at heart.
Absolutely.
The gene, you know, it's in the genes.
That's absolutely true.
In the genes. With that, we got to take a little break. When we come back, we want to talk about Dr. Birx, and I'd like to know whether the government was guessing, lying, or hoping.
Well, that question
about
was
this
asked.
whole vaccine thing.
Right.
Yeah, we have to thank Jordan for that. Anyway, when we come back, we're going to talk about that a little bit. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, we are back on this July 4th weekend.
Actually, I think it's probably, I haven't quite decided. I'm pretty sure it's my favorite holiday. I love the 4th for a lot of reasons, and obviously for the reasons we've been discussing, but I just like this time of year, and I like the, I think I've told you, I spent a couple of 4th of Julys up there in New England, the Massachusetts area, and I have to say, as liberal a place as that is, there's something about the way they do things this time of year. It really, and I guess it's because so much of the history is there, it really has that sort of American summer, constant, just the whole 4th of July feel to it. Yeah. And I like this time of year in general.
Well, I do too,
I love this holiday.
And I just don't understand, the fireworks, the red, white, and blue, the patriotic music. I don't know why people don't like that. I don't know why we have some people who are just so malcontent.
Well, you hit on it. That's the word.
Yeah.
They're just dissatisfied on an internal level with things that can't be fixed.
Yeah. I saw something on, I don't know whether Twitter or Facebook, one of those outlets. And there was a Medal of Honor winner who recently passed away. Mm-hmm. And people were commenting on it. There was people who served with him and what have you. And some moron, and I want to call him that, a moron, posted on there, "Why are you celebrating sending people in to kill people with chemical weapons?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
I'm like, that's one of those people who needs a safe space.
Yeah.
Who doesn't think about the fact that when those boys were in the LSTs landing on the beaches,
right,
Omaha Beach, yeah, they were looking for a safe space.
That's right.
But they were looking for a space safe from the MG-42.
That's right.
7mm that the Germans were firing.
That's right. And the wall of bullets that were headed their way as those transport gates dropped.
I'm going to tell you, the left today really disgusts me.
Yeah.
Because they have no concept. When they need affirmation.
Right.
I'm sorry. If you have to have affirmation from other people, you have a problem.
That's right. That's exactly right.
You should be in counseling because you really have a problem.
That's right.
The founding fathers weren't looking for affirmation.
No, and in fact, one of the last lines of the thing you showed is a line we often hear about pledging their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor. Well, those weren't just words. I mean, they actually put everything on the line and their lives because had they not been successful, they'd have been executed.
They would have been executed.
Yeah.
Exactly, because that's what the British did to anyone who resisted the crown.
That's right.
They would shoot them in the street.
Hang them.
They would hang them. Yeah. Well, Dr. Birx, if you remember during the COVID hoax, the pandemic, Dr. Birx was one of the individuals on stage with Dr. Fauci and Trump.
Yeah, Rush Limbaugh always referred to her as the scarf queen.
Yeah, she always wore a scarf.
Yeah.
That's how you would know her, if you remember the lady that wore scarves every time. Well, she was asked to testify before the House Oversight and Reform Select Subcommittee on the coronavirus crisis. And Representative Joyner asked her a question about, did you know about the vaccine being ineffective, about reinfections after you were vaccinating? Did you know that the government was lying when they said that if you got vaccinated, you wouldn't get COVID?
Right.
And ultimately, she really didn't have a good answer.
Yeah, wasn't her answer something, and I'm paraphrasing, wasn't it something tantamount to, well, we hoped it would work out that way?
Yes. To which Jordan followed up with, well, was the government lying?
Was this Jim Jordan of Ohio?
Jim
Yeah,
Jordan,
yeah.
Was
yeah.
the government lying, guessing, or hoping? Right, what was it? Because that's what all the data now appears to indicate, that they were either lying, guessing, or hoping. Which, to me, when someone that's doing one of those three is saying, trust the science.
Yeah, exactly. And really, it turns out the people who are questioning all that are the ones that are vindicated.
Yes,
I mean, would you really want to take a vaccine that was, I won't say it was hastily created. I mean, I think it was created for the most part with sincerity, to the extent that the people who, tried to create it.
Absolutely.
Right. But it was created in a fast track fashion that if I were told, well, we kind of hope it does what we say it's going to do,
Exactly.
I might be less inclined to take it. Well, as it turns out, I was less inclined to take it. I didn't take it for a lot of those very reasons, because I just assumed that, I don't trust these folks, and I'm sure they're all lying about any number of aspects of this thing.
Well,
Turns out they were.
I will tell you, I can tell you safely that I firmly believe that Dr. Fauci lied.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
continues to lie.
Yeah, well, his
He
whole-
lied about the gain of function research.
Yeah, and the origins, the lab leak origins, and every aspect of his involvement in this thing is tantamount to, a mass, a crime of mass scope.
Yeah. And Jordan went on to ask Dr. Birx about the gain of function, to which she said, well, we should not continue gain of function in places like China, Ukraine, some of these other countries.
Which is an admission that they have been doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah, those are her words.
No, that's not gain of function research.
Right.
We're adding to this viral structure to make it more viral, to make it more virulent. But that's not gain of function.
Right. He just lied. Right. It's like, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes?
Exactly.
It's a classic case of that.
It really is. It really is. And that brings to mind the president, Shazam. Joe Biden has blamed Putin. He's blamed greedy oil companies. He's blamed social media. He's blamed
War in Ukraine, which is, I guess,
The war in
Putin.
Ukraine.
Yeah, which is, of course, Putin.
and he's blaming greedy gas stations.
Right.
Typically gas stations are only making a few pennies on a gas.
At most. And bear in mind, state and federal taxes. You really got me thinking about something that always sticks in my craw. I think the federal gas tax is, it's 18 cents because they're talking about relinquishing it, right? They're talking about a holiday, a federal gas tax. So think about it. The federal government makes 18 cents on every gallon of gas that gets sold. The people who actually create the gas and go make the investment to create that gasoline, they get maybe 5 cents, tops, okay? And the government gets 18 cents, and yet they produce nothing, they contribute nothing to it, they're thieves, parasites, and it really just bugs the living you-know-what out of me that somehow they arrogate to themselves the right to take that money and that productive wealth, and then in turn act like the oil companies and the producers of this really miracle energy source are somehow greedy and evil. you know, and look, I understand big oil and all that. I mean, they have plenty of nefarious aspects to their operations, but at the end of the day, they're not the government with guns. So I have less fear from them than I do of people like Joe Biden and his minions. But it is really obnoxious, just on its face, that they'll take 18 cents of every gallon of gas, and the state will take some portion of that too. They're making a fortune off that, and they produce none of it. They do nothing,
Right.
and lately they've been hindering it.
Yeah, yeah. The state of North Carolina takes 38.5 cents a gallon.
Good Lord.
38.5
Good
cents
Lord.
a gallon.
Right.
Of every gallon of gas.
Right.
The federal government gets 18 cents on gas and 24 cents on diesel fuel.
Right. Right. Now, you know, you can say, well, yeah, but we got the roads and all that. Fine. But don't pretend that somehow the oil companies are making all this money on gasoline when you're actually stealing a lot of that wealth to pay for things probably in the most inefficient way possible. I mean, I'd be perfectly happy with a privatized road system that you pay a fee to use, because I guarantee it'd be a whole lot cheaper than some government constructed system like the one we have now.
Yeah, I tell you, you know, I keep hearing these lefties talk about, oh, these corporations, well, with all this inflation, they're making just tremendous profits. They're charging people so much more, now they're making these greater profits.
Yeah, in dollars that are worth less.
Exactly.
I mean, what are these people, stupid?
Exactly.
Asked and answered.
Exactly. If your dollar's worth less, but you're getting more of them, well,
It's a debt. It's a wash.
Exactly.
That's what the problem with inflation is costs usually outstrip income for individuals.
Exactly.
For most individuals. Some people, wealthy elite, so forth, some people who are smart at investing, and really the stock market has been the mechanism the last 10, 15 years by which people have been able to offset inflation. Barely. Just a little bit more.
Right.
Now that's all upside down.
that is completely upside down. It's going to take years to recover.
Because don't forget, standard Federal Reserve policy is 2% inflation. That's the target. But 2% compounded every year for what, 50, 100 years?
Yeah.
That's a lot of doggone inflation. Okay,
right.
That's a lot of theft.
That's exactly right. If you're not getting at least 2% a year, you're not even staying up with it.
Right.
You know, you're falling behind.
That's right.
If you get 2-3% raise every 3-4 years, well, you're behind.
And that's just breaking even.
Yeah.
That still doesn't account for the fact that they are stealing 2%
Exactly.
of the national wealth through these inflationary policies, and that's by design. They know that people can kind of tolerate 2%.
Yeah.
So basically, it's an additional tax on you that's created, engineered, and imposed on you by the central banks.
And you are being really taxed now because of all the money that the government gave out for people to stay at home
And not work.
and not work.
So you compounded inflating the money supply, i.e. printing money, creating more money, with a total shutdown of productivity. So you got nobody producing anything and injecting money into the system, and they act like they're surprised. Well, like Janet Yellen, well, I might have been wrong.
yeah.
I
she
might have
did.
been wrong in saying that that it was transitory.
Yeah, she knew.
She loathsome.
She knew. Well, on this July 4th weekend, I hope you have a great weekend
Yeah.
and a great week. And remember, Joe Biden has put 100 regulations on oil and gas since he took office. So when you pump that gas, when you're driving home, pumping that gas, think about that.
Right, and please reflect on your liberty, because once you lose it, you ain't getting it back.
That's right. And with that, good night. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.